it's so easy to be outside of the community and talk about what I think is wrong with something else. Oh my God, this exists in that community as well. Okay, but what exists in yours? Absolutely, I do think love is also in the center of feminism. Because I'm a woman, the tone of my voice needs to be at a particular pitch. What I need to say or what I have to say need to be around ABC areas and not XYZ areas. Theory adds a lot of value, but I also have to experience. And if I don't have that experience, I must shut up and listen. That is the first and the most important thing, I think, in feminism.
Hi, I'm Nikunj, and welcome to Postcards, your passport to unseen corners of people, policy, and politics. Today, I have a fabulous guest, Disha, with me. Disha, I have known you for quite some time, and you have been working for more than a decade on issues around intersectionality, social justice, of course, feminism, and a lot of other gender policy issues.
Okay.
And I'm so glad to finally have you on Postcards, and welcome.
I am so glad to be here. I remember maybe in 2023 when we were talking about this. Yeah. And, the number of meetings we've had. And to actually be here present, to be shooting for this, again, just such a strong reminder that, when you think, you act, you feel, and you put your belief into something, it actually does turn out.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad to be a part of this. Yeah.
No, I'm so glad. And I'm so grateful to you for trusting this space as well and trusting the process. And also, you were so incredible just sharing your feedback around the episodes that we're developing, specifically having that very strong gender lens. Of course, we are still learning through the process as well, and we always want to hope to improve and do better. And therefore, I have a request to everyone who's listening. Please, more than like, share, and subscribe. We will definitely appreciate that. Also, share your honest comments and feedback on what do you think about the episode. Is there anything that you related to and something that we can feed on or improve in the next? Maybe any topics that you want to cover. But coming back to our conversation today, I think there's a very interesting Hindi term called Pehchaan, right? When you think about the word Pehchaan, what comes to your mind and how do you explain or go about it?
I think for me, it's about, Pehchaan literally means identity in English. And I think when you're born in a system, which most of us are, if not all of us, we're born in a family, we're born in a structure, we're born in a system of policies, of politics, of caste, of class, of gender, of abilities and disabilities. And you're born into a lot of these things. So I think for me, identity is also very often stepping away from some of that, is to recognize your own privilege when you're born as a cis, het, upper caste, English speaking woman into a background where you don't have to struggle with a lot of things. But when there are these structures already in place for you, I think a lot of identity is what you do with those privileges and the experiences that you have. So as much as my identity is of being somebody who's born in a particular privileged caste, my identity is also of being a compassionate, empathetic, patient person who believes in the power of faith, belief, trust, love, harmony, and all of those things. Yeah. Which is actually what I was talking about, like our conversation 2 years ago, and just sitting somewhere in Barakamba and generally just talking about how important it is to do more than what we're just doing, and not important, but how there's a need, and how it was a thought and a feeling and a belief, and it turning out what it is today.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. That's incredible. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, I mean, it's so great that you actually remember those 2 years.
Of course.
And you nudged a lot. I'll be very honest. Like, you really nudged, you believed, and I think we showed so much love
Absolutely. I do think love is also in the center of feminism. I think love and joy is in the center of all of these movements. It truly is. Um, yeah.
And this kind of reminds me, when you were speaking about this quote essentially by Bell Hooks, where she talks about love in a way that there can be no love without justice. Abuse and neglect negate love.
Yeah.
So love is also shaped by overall societal expectations and the norms that we have and things like that. So how do you see that playing out in terms of, how the roles are divided between genders that way?
I absolutely like bang on, right? Like there cannot be love without justice. There is love and there is justice, whether it's honestly your personal relationships with at home with your partner, or there is love in the society or in the movement, anything, right? But I do think, having said that, like just going back to what I was saying earlier about being born in a particular family, being born with certain privileges, or being born without some of those privileges, right? What does it do? What does it surely do to your understanding of love, right? And how does then love become a decision, right? Like it is so easy to say that love comes easy to me, and I find love in spaces where I go, when I look a particular way, I talk a particular way, I come from privilege, I have access to those places, right? Where the idea of, like, this thing about, oh, I don't speak my mind, or I speak my mind, where I'm so privileged and protected that I am the oppressor, you
Mm.
know. Of course, love comes easy to me, I'm the oppressor.
Mhm.
Love will never be difficult for me because I'm the oppressor.
Mhm.
Um, and what are these roles that are defined by the society, right? That women are supposed to be nurturing, that women are supposed to be taking care, right? The labor of love is something that is often not looked at, right? And I absolutely also believe that love finds all of us. And I absolutely also think that there is love for all of us. There is no lack of love in the universe. There is no lack of love for anybody. We just don't teach people how to love themselves. We don't teach people how to accept themselves, how to approve of themselves, which is why we keep projecting a lot of these things onto others, right? If we go back to even the Constitution, right, and talk about what are some of the things that are written in the Constitution, I genuinely feel like a lot of principles of social justice and feminist movements are around love, right? What would it take away from me to respect everybody? Nothing. Why is it so hard to do it? You know, why is it so important for me the minute I see somebody to put them in a particular box? Why do I have to do that? Who has taught me that? How much do I have to unlearn before I start learning again? You know, I'm not sure if I answered your question or I went on a tangent, but yeah.
No, no, I think it's very helpful because I think what you're centering around love is how we don't typically understand love from a popular media like Bollywood or anywhere else, right? The whole conception, we can talk for 2 hours just about the Bollywood's idea or the imagining in the Bollywood of what popularly love is, especially in the 90s, for example.
Sure, I
It is
hear
a
you.
whole different thing. But I think what you're also centering around is how love is so fundamental that how do you relate love when we're thinking about building a constitution for a nation, right? Or
Right.
when you're talking about principles of social justice.
Yeah.
And so therefore that very reductive definition of love.
Right.
And I think so I think that's very helpful how you're bringing it out. And I think it's Sarah Ahmed which also talked about whenever we speak, I seem to roll.
Yeah.
And she was essentially saying that people are
Yeah.
like kind of disapproving of
Right.
whenever anyone's speaking. So there's also the cost
Right.
to just speak up,
Absolutely.
right? That women also have to face
Yeah.
often.
Yeah. And I think Sarah Ahmed, like you mentioned, right, whenever we speak, eyes roll. And that happens because we've already put people in certain boxes, right? So because I'm a woman, the tone of my voice needs to be at a particular pitch. What I need to say or what I have to say need to be around ABC areas and not XYZ areas. Uh, and and if I do go around some of those things, it causes great discomfort, right? And instead of sitting with that discomfort, what the society has done in the past has been around just trying to either negate that voice or just punish, right? Which is also why you see the number of students that have been in prisons for over 10 years now,
Yeah.
right? The sheer inability, and who are happy when they come out on bail, who, the joy is what makes you uncomfortable, right? That they are not going to keep quiet, right? And because you just don't know what to do with the discomfort that you have with them talking about things that are very, very important for the country, calling them anti nationals. And while they're the only ones who actually do care enough to do something, putting them behind bars, because bakse mein nahi, if you can't put them in a box, then you physically go put them somewhere else, right? What is this if not erasure, if
Yeah.
not negating, right? So it's that, right? Eyes will roll because it's the discomfort of not being able to listen to a perspective which is not yours, you know. It's that inherent discomfort. And I also think that is also about that inability to accept your own self. You know, I walk into a room and I know that my opinion is not the most important. I walk into the room and know that I'm one out of four, right? And that's all that I need to know. I'm not the one. Yeah, even though sometimes I give that vibe.
I think the humility has been there, even if that vibe is there. But I think it kind of also makes me wonder about your own journey as a feminist, right? And if I can ask you to share a little bit about that, when do you start identifying with the word feminist, or feminism in general, and how do you define it today for yourself?
I think so. As I working really young, or I would like to believe, I finished my undergrad, and while I was in undergrad, I was also doing this part-time work, and then I did full-time work, and a lot of my work was around gender, and it was a young people's organization, and I think we were on a retreat or something. I don't remember. And somebody asked, "So, how many of you are feminists?" And there were two of us who raised our hand. Right, I was one of them, and I don't think I had an understanding or comprehension of what it means. And my understanding and comprehension of it still is expanding and growing, right? Like, I don't think love was a big part of my feminism. I think it's also where I am at in my life right now, where self love and self acceptance and, just being loving to myself and being loving to others is a big part of the journey that I'm personally on, that it has become a part of my understanding of something as big as that. I don't think that time I understood caste. I don't think at that time I understood what disability truly means, right? Um, and I looked at caste in particular as something that would happen once upon a time. And I do come from privilege and education and access to resources and um, yeah, so I do think at that time I didn't particularly understand what it meant. So I do think at that time it was limited understanding that men and women should be, it was more about equality as opposed to equity. It was more about, the fact that, like, oh, everybody should be given an equal opportunity, without understanding what does it take to give people the resources to have that equal opportunity, right? And I think that understanding has definitely evolved over time by surrounding myself with people who challenge that understanding, which is the most important thing, right? Like, my opinion is not the most important opinion.
Yeah.
It's one of the opinions. So being around people who actively challenge that, people who make me think, and where in spaces where I can be challenged without feeling out, without getting confrontational, and without feeling that that I don't know anything, or without feeling that somebody's out there to get me, with a feeling of actually wanting to learn, to grow, because this is something that is so important to me. So I do think just being around those people, and of course, like I said, Also having access, right? So if I am reading about caste, I'm not going to pick up a book by Arundhati Roy and have to say it out loud, right? I'm not going to book up, right? I am going to pick up books by people, by Dalit writers, understand their story, understand their journey. So it's also having and understanding that, right? And of course, because of the privilege, I have access to a lot of these things. But yeah, so actually being around people who get to challenge that, growing, learning, and taking that responsibility, right? So it's not my responsibility to come and tell you about what it's like to be a woman and live in a city like Delhi or live in a city like Gurgaon and navigate that. That onus is not on me. That onus is on you to ask, and I can help you navigate that, right? So not putting that onus on somebody else. And to see that without intersectionality, there is no feminism. That's it. And that's at the end of it, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
There is no, yeah.
And Sarah Ahmed also said that, right? Without intersectionality, there's nothing. Like, I think she more appropriately said, feminism either will be intersectional or it will be bullshit.
Yeah.
And she's very straightforward. Of course, that's
Absolutely
amazing about her.
And it's the same thing about caste and gender. Like, you cannot understand gender if you do not understand caste. Full stop.
Yeah.
There are no two ways about that.
And so, if you have to define intersectional feminism for a 7-year-old,
wow, okay,
how would you define them? For them, sorry.
For them, intersection feminism for a 7-year-old. How cute! 7 years. So I'm recently become an aunt.
Okay.
I have a 11-month-old niece, and that's the only that's something I'm prepping up for, right? 6 years from now, I'm gonna explain to her what it means, and I'm so I'm just like super into kids now because I have her in my life. I'm obsessed with her. Anyway, not to divert my attention, but she's all I can think about in this moment.
She's very cute.
She is adorable. You've seen her photos, yes. So how would I explain it to a 7-year-old? I'm actually not sure of how I would explain it to a 7-year-old. I think probably through conversations, through art, through images, through books, through all of that, right? Like, like gender, caste, class, disability, language, age, all of these things are everywhere. You don't need to look for them. You just need to identify them. Right? So where does feminism come in? All of them is something that everybody needs to define for themselves. And that's particularly how, right? Like, there is language. I can switch to Hindi in between, right? आप कौन सी भाषा में बात कर रहे हैं, आप किससे कैसे बात कर रहे हैं, आप कौन सी किताबें पढ़ रहे हैं, किसने वो किताब पढ़ी देखी है, आप कहाँ जाके खाना खा रहे हैं, आप किसके साथ खाना खा रहे हैं, आप कौन सी पिक्चर देख रहे हैं, आप कौन सी मूवीज़ के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, आप अपने दोस्तों के साथ कहाँ जा रहे हैं, आप किसको कैसे देख रहे हैं, आप who you are attracted to, right? Who you're attracted to, what your kinks are, who you're not attracted to. It's everywhere. There is a hierarchy in everything, in all of these things that I've mentioned, right? कितनी वाइट लोगों की किताब मैं पढ़ रही हूँ, अपर कास्ट लोगों की किताब में क्या भेजे में जा रहा है, थेरेपी कौन ले, हर जगह है, भर के है, तो उसको निकालना, उसको समझना, उसको अनलर्न करना, अपने आप को चैलेंज करना, ये पूरा जिंदगी भर का काम है. And I think 7 years old is a great place to start. Yeah, and because that's when you also identify, right? Like, I don't want you to read what I read. I want you to read other things also. So you have access, चाहे वो भाषा में हो या किसी भी चीज़ में हो, I want you to have access to all of those things, right? So probably that's how I would, like, giving more, just sharing more, explore, exposing more to some of the things that we've just sort of always hidden away from, right? Because we're scared, right? Yeah.
I think how you explained it for kids, and you said essentially it's a lifelong process of unlearning, relearning, challenging everything that you've ever thought about, right? And I think that is so much at the center. And then how you described it for a 7-year-old, I think that process, because that's a very young age where your notions are still not so strong. So I think even just the process you imbibe, more about how do you unlearn, relearn, how do you always believe in the idea that there's no universal truth
That,
at any point of
oh wow,
time.
that is so beautiful.
And that process, I guess, is more important to learn versus learning whatever you're learning, I guess. I hope it can be part of some of our basic early childhood or literacy numeracy education.
And also just adding to what you said, right? Like there's no universal truth. And everything you know can be challenged, right? And to sit with that discomfort because it is uncomfortable, right? Like as a 34-year-old, just to sit and be like, oh fuck, but that is what I thought was the truth my entire life, to now sit and challenge it, right? Oh, I've always thought that I'm this compassionate person, but actually to look at the places where I've not been compassionate to my own self,
Right.
to others, to all of that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think there have been versions of me, like for example, a few years back, 10 years back, where people have said, you know what, you did this. And I'm like, you are right in so many ways. It is so uncomfortable.
It is so uncomfortable.
Just to have that idea. But I was this person.
Yeah.
And maybe I haven't moved enough from that to where I thought I am. But I think that reimagining and taking that inputs from others so that you're not just living in that bubble, which points to the idea of what you were saying. Who are you reading? Who are you interacting with? How your circle looks like, and all of that is just so important as well.
Yeah.
And I think you were also talking about paintings and all of that for 7 years old. So if you have to paint a picture of a feminist, how would that look like?
I would just say joy. I would just say colors, all of the colors, and that is all. And I wouldn't paint a picture because I would be putting it in a box. Feminism is just not that, right? Like if your feminism is around whatever, as long your feminism is around what you believe in and how you work your life. And I do think feminism, like love, is an action word. It is a feeling, but it's also an action. I don't think I'd be able to paint a picture. I think it would just be colors because it cannot be, I know what it cannot be. And I think sometimes that's good to know. It's good to know what it can't be before you know what it can be. So it cannot be a cis, upper caste woman, or like, feminism can look like different things to different people. So I don't know, maybe just open skies with all different colors of birds, right? That's what feminism looks like for me. Or just different colored leaves, and that's it. Like it's colorful, it's joyful, it's abundance. That's what feminism looks like to me.
Kind of sounds like everyone is welcome.
Everyone. It's a movement. The more the hands, the merrier it gets. I don't know if that's a saying, but I made one.
We can code it.
Yeah, we can code it, right? It's everybody's welcome. Feminism is not a group of like 10 women sitting in a corner plotting against the world. Fuck no, right? We have had to fight to get the right to fucking vote.
Yeah.
Right? Like basic things, right? To drive, to the like मिला नहीं तभी तो झगड़ा करा कि मिले है ना. And it's for everybody is welcome, and it is for everyone. It's not for me, it's not for you, it's for everybody. And there is abundance of it. There is no lack. Everybody is welcome.
Right.
Join in, share, talk. How would you do it at your own house? What would you change about yourself? Like, what can I do today to be more inclusive to people around me? Is what I need to answer for myself each day, every day. What are my thought patterns that need to change to be more inclusive, right? What are those inherent beliefs that I have that I would never say out loud because of whatever reasons? And what are some of those things that need to change around feminism?
Yeah. And I think kind of makes me think about that maybe your feminism, and I would say this is not feminism, if it's excluding someone just because of their identity or just because of, it is oppressing someone else, in some ways, then it is not because what you're saying. It's not inclusive overall. Sorry,
I remember I had gone for an interview where I'm glad that I'm not working in that place. I've gone for an interview. It was the last round of the interview. And this person asked me that, oh, so do you identify as a feminist? I said, yes. I said, okay, I don't like women who talk about other women. and how, like, oh, she's not a feminist because she doesn't have a phone, or she's not a feminist because she's married, and all of that. And I was like, okay, I hear you, um, but I don't need to have this conversation with you. Like, if your understanding of feminism is limited to women talking about women, then like, I just think a lot can be explored there, and I don't need I don't need to fit into your definition of feminism. That's what I don't need to do, right? What I need to do is what I said, like, how can I be more inclusive? How can I challenge my own thoughts and my beliefs and my feelings around some of these things? How can I welcome, and how can I expand my own knowledge, and how can I just, and everybody's welcome. If there's more than enough for everyone, right? There's a lot we need to challenge in 2025 with the voting just happened. We don't know what's coming, and there's a lot that needs to be challenged. So the more the merrier.
No, of course. And you were talking about feminist movement just before that, right? I think what are some, I would say, like some movements in India, closer to home, or in South Asia, or around the world, in certain communities in India, that have really captured your imagination in a way, right? You're like, oh wow, and they had a huge uh, influence on you. Maybe you participated in them, or maybe they were in the past, or whatever it may be.
I think all sort of feminist movements in India have influenced me, and even outside, like it's I don't know if I'd be able to talk about one particular movement. I can do talk about a little bit about some projects and some organizations that are doing some great work around feminism and gender and intersectionality at the heart of that. Whether it's the Unsound Project or the Queer Muslim Project, I do think they're doing a lot around intersectionality and talking about it through art, and or talking about mental health, and there is more than enough. And I do think when it comes to movements, I have, whether it was the Pinjara Tod movement that happened. Yeah, so I think there were a lot of, like, especially during when I was doing my masters, and when I was so I think primarily Pinjara Tod, but I do think a lot of others as well, that were around, at the heart of which was feminism and intersectionality mostly. Yeah.
And I think at the what you have been talking about, and a couple of other guests like Anish also bring it up, like
Right.
at the heart of intersectional feminism is the fact that marginalized communities experience power structures more severely, right? And those
Absolutely.
inherently that has been there, right?
Absolutely.
And there have been other movements like the triple talaq ban,
Right.
and decriminalization of homosexuality and things
Right.
like that, right? And which have had played different roles
Correct.
in India. So how do you see these legal complexities playing out when, from a lens of intersectional feminism at times?
I think, just going back to, and I'll just add one or two more points about this, is that, that there is hierarchy, right? Like, nobody can deny it. To come and say that we're all the same, we wish we were all the same. We're not. There are certain lives that are mourned more than others, right? There are certain losses that are accepted by the society. There are certain lives that are celebrated by the government, right? And that is the unfortunate truth of the country and the society and the world that we live in. That, like, my life will be more as opposed to somebody else's life, right? There are, like, like, when you talk about, for example, right, everywhere in the news, there was the rape case of the girl who was, the DTC case that happened, and I'm not going to use the word that was used very often, and that unfortunate incident, and you have people from all over the world covering it, not even in India. And what about other cases of violence and rape and honor killing and hanging that are happening rapidly to this day? Which media is covering that? How much are we talking about it? How much are certain cases getting covered? And it is so unfortunate what happened, but certain lives are mourned more, right? and not to take away at all from the life and what that person went through. It is, but also like that one particular case and no mention of other things that have happened, right? What is it, right? If not identity, right? If not intersectionality, why are certain lives? Why is there a hierarchy of laws? Which is something that we all experience. Everyone in their life, right, experiences loss, whether it of any kind, right? And some, unfortunately, for some of them, some people of all kinds, but all of us experience the feeling of loss, right? And imagine to live in a country and in a world where there is hierarchy of laws, that you will only be mourned or covered by the media or will be of relevance, not even covered by media, but will be of relevance if you come from a particular place. Imagine that your life is not worth being spoken about and having to live your life like that. So yeah, that just came to me when you started talking about, and what does it mean to actually be at the margins, right? What does it mean to not be? And people talk about how power fluctuates and all of that. Sure, power fluctuates, but power is at the center. Who are we kidding, right? Are we trying to make ourselves like there is power, right? Like we know which party is in power today, right? We know which party is in power today. And what does that mean for lives at the margins, right? Who is it actually affecting and who is it actually not affecting? Yeah, that's just a thought that popped in my head that I wanted to share.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I think even recently, what happened in Kolkata last year, again,
Again,
I
the
think
medical
around that there
student,
were
yeah.
so many other, incidents around sexual harassment,
Absolutely.
around rape, and a lot of
Right.
other things that were
Right.
happening, but
Yeah.
not getting the coverage,
Not getting the
or
coverage.
or coming into the mind, which also talks about like that solidarity,
Sure.
even among different communities or people as well,
Yeah.
wherein you're turning up for certain cause,
Yeah.
or for certain things, but for in other spaces you're not.
You're not, right? And who's that solidarity serving? Am I feeling better about myself? Right? And is that my purpose? And nobody's saying don't feel great. Huge advocate.
Yeah.
Feel great about yourself, right? But what are you feeling great about yourself about, right? What topic is making into your coffee break conversations, है ना? And I remember exactly, thanks for bringing that up, right? And again, by not at all am I trying to say that, what had happened was okay or that it shouldn't be spoken about or that loss is not real. That loss is real. It's unfortunate what happened. It is really, really hard to, sit with something like that. Right? And all through this, I'm trying to say is that, like, why is something else not being spoken about, right? Why are certain lives more important? Why are other lives not important, right? Why is something that is happening in a village in UP done by upper caste people not being spoken about, right? What is the resistance? What is it that makes us look at rape as violence and not at manual scavenging as violence? What is so inherently embedded and structured in us to do that, right? And why is it that we're talking about only certain lives? If everybody is important, everybody is not equally important, right? So yeah, and then the idea of when you were talking about triple talaq and you're talking about decriminalization, what are some of the undertones in those documents and those discussions is what is really important. Who's coming out and saying what, who's presenting, who's the face of what, right? Is I think also really, really important. It is very easy for upper caste women to talk about why hijab shouldn't exist. Yeah. But I don't come from a community. I am like it's so easy to be like, no, yeah, that is regressive, right? Or for an upper caste man, I don't think upper caste men should speak. No.
Fair enough. Yeah.
No, but I don't think that. I actually think they should speak. I think they should recognize their own privilege. Yeah, I think that is really, really important. But yeah, like, it's so easy to be outside of the community and talk about what I think is wrong with something else, Oh my God, this exists in that community as well. Okay, but what exists in yours? Right? And I truly do believe as a human being, I do think, sure, having theory really helps, right? I do come from an academic background, so I do think theory has a lot of, and I read a lot, so I do think theory adds a lot of value, but I also have to experience. And if I don't have that experience, I must shut up and listen. That is the first and the most important thing, I think, in feminism.
Yeah, I think a quote, what I'm hearing is just lived experience. I think even in academia research, I think it doesn't found a place as much as it should, because it's someone else's labor experiences that you're basing all these theories on at the end of the day anyway, but they don't even find a mention at times. You just become a larger statistic in the bigger thing. But I think based on what you were sharing as well, I think it also makes me think about how much of what is being shown out there is performative. So how much is performative feminism, how much is performative solidarity versus actually believing in it and doing what needs to be done at times as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think while we were talking about all these incidents, I think that idea or a culture of victim blaming also emerges in these spaces, right? Where someone's place, clothing, situation, identity, and a lot of other factors become the centerpiece versus assigning the blame to the perpetrator, and which I think comes from this, how patriarchy is imagined and how it is there as well, right? So how do you see that playing out more and more, and how do you kind of break out of that essentially?
I think with violence, I think one thing is, and I can again talk about myself, and everything that I've been saying is not so much about the other as it is about myself.
Of course. And you can always you can only talk about yourself at the end of the day.
But I also have to reiterate that because I think as humans, including myself, I have the ability to look at myself and make it about me. But everything that I've said today and everything that I'm going to say is all about my opinion and my experiences and how I view things. So I think also with violence, I think most of us, or again, going back to me, have been a perpetrator, victim, and have witnessed violence, right? And maybe not realizing that I'm perpetrating it, not realizing that I'm a victim or surviving it, and also not realizing that what I'm witnessing is violence, at a very personal level, because a lot of times there are other experiences, right? Violence is not an absolute emotion or an experience, and nor is love, right? So unfortunately, a lot of times, a lot of experiences in life have these contradictory emotions and experiences that have overlapped, and contradiction is okay. I'm okay with being a contradiction, so I do think that so one would be to reflect, and I do think that ये महायोगी टाइप के जो लोग आ जाते हैं, राइट, एंड नॉट ओनली योगी, बट ये कब की बात है, मुझे तो कौन सा मिनिस्टर ने क्या बोल दिया था कि नूडल्स नहीं, चाउमीन, सॉरी, करेक्ट वर्ड, खाते हैं जो युवा, वो ऐसे लड़कियों को देख के एक्साइट हो जाते हैं, या जो लड़कियां ये कपड़े पहनती हैं उनको ये कपड़े नहीं पहनने चाहिए थे, या फिर लाइक ओ व्हाट वाज शी डूइंग एट दैट आवर, right? Like, and how, even if you're not saying that out loud, how that's your first thought,
your reaction,
right? Imagine how much of that is in your subconscious, right? And I do think, right, like I do think a lot of us, so interesting fact, can be challenged, but a lot of who we are, like 95% of who we are is our subconscious, right? And our subconscious gets framed in very early years. So imagine being a child and hearing things like that, or absorbing things like that, or seeing things like that, to actually have like, it's the same thing, right? When I wake up in the morning or I'm going to bed at night, there are thoughts that are constantly playing in my head. Those thoughts are not things that I consciously want to think about, right? So that's my subconscious playing in my head, right? So how many of these things, right, like you inherently believe, right? You inherently think that this is what it is, So Yeah, like where is that coming from? कि उसने क्या पहना था? What does that have to do with anything? Are we trying to say that babies are not getting raped, right? That girls as young as 2 years old are getting raped. That women as old as 93-year old are getting raped, right? Trans people are getting harassed for stepping out of their house if they're not getting harassed by being inside their house enough, right? Like can't even imagine what a life to live. And I again don't want to talk about certain identities and certain communities only
Yeah.
in violence, right? Because there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of love in the community, right? So I do want to talk about that, but there's a lot of love in being a woman, right? I embrace it, I love it, but like just to talk about how there are questions around that, and what is it that makes it so easy for us and so important to ask that, right? And why are we listening to people who are asking these questions, right? What was she wearing? So irrelevant. Where did it happen? So irrelevant. Why is it not who did it? You know, and, there are lots of things around it. Yeah, yeah. So maybe just that.
No, I think it also makes me think about this incident last year during the Olympics with Imane Khalif, the
Right.
boxer,
Right.
and how so many people had the reaction, oh, she doesn't seem like a woman, and she's possibly a trans woman, and therefore she's exploiting the system.
Right.
And then some very prominent folks, including J.K. Rowling, went out there and like questioned the whole thing.
Right.
And I think the whole thing became about, oh, she needs to be tested, this, that, and a lot of stuff happened around that. And like what you were saying also then made me think about this incident, and also this question emerges, like where does I think that collision almost of women and queerness at times when they're imagined as well.
Right.
And also like so many times that women are asked to go through these tests.
Correct.
Was it the other way around? Men, at least as far as I know, I can be
Sure.
wrong, I haven't really heard about men going through these tests,
Right.
in the same
Right.
field of sports,
Right.
just to prove that they're man.
Correct.
And so how does, that collision of both women and queerness in terms of how we imagine it, works out, and therefore what it talks about the gender roles / expectations as well.
I do think gender roles have been something that have been defined much early on, right? Like even if we go back in time, or we go back to our childhood or to many years ago, right? There are certain norms and expectations and roles that are expected from the other to make sure that the society runs in a particular way. So the oppressor keeps oppressing and the oppressed keeps getting oppressed, right? But again, like I said earlier, I don't want to talk about particular communities just in lines of talking about oppressed or just talking about violence, because there's a lot of love, joy, voice, opinion that comes from the community. And I think that is what the oppressor is scared to lose. That it comes, like oppressing somebody only comes from fear.
Yeah.
Right? So at the heart of the oppressed is fear. Right? So I think that, not like, I wouldn't know of 5 men who've been challenged, right? Even if you only talk about sports right here. And we can think and name of so many women from different communities, religions, countries that have been challenged for something like this, right? And also you have people who have, people who come from people who have particular power, right? Like this author, right? Who's again, there are lots of fans, but like if you've read the work, like how she has spoken about transness and trans people has been very derogatory. Who come out and say some of these things. And my only thing is, you have so much power. You're reaching out to so many people, right? Because of the kind of work that you've done in the past. Why not take a moment to reflect, right? And how much privilege does one have to challenge somebody else's identity? Amazes me, astonishes me, surprises me. Makes me want to think of times when I may have done that knowingly, unknowingly, and also to be so much more cognizant of that. Like, how much do you have to be able to do something like that? And what kind of world also that we're living in to have that much authority and power and access, right? Because now, like, I remember growing up, we didn't have Twitter and Facebook, I sound like my mother, but like we didn't have Instagram and we didn't even have computers till like what was this, 95 or
Right.
90 or whatever, right? Like,
Or even later, I guess.
or even later, right?
Very,
and I'm not
very
talking about
late.
कि हमको मेरे को कब access मिला,
हाँ.
but like आया कब इंडिया में ये सब,
I mean, maybe like in US they would have it earlier.
हाँ,
India में तो
sure.
2000.
2090, 95 maybe, yeah. एंड देन सोशल मीडिया तो खैर बहुत ही बाद में आया है, पर एंड उसकी वजह सोशल मीडिया, एंड नॉट टू से कि ये गुड है या बैड है, मतलब आप इट डिपेंड्स ऑन हाउ यू आर यूजिंग सम ऑफ दीज थिंग्स, बट लाइक yeah, really just looking at like how much power do you have that it goes to people, and then going back to the first question, the second question maybe that you asked me, how would you explain to a 7-year-old who has access to everything, right? So that's who you're reaching. That's who you're reaching out to. That is also the power of social media, right? Is that what you want them to hear?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like, when we think about social media, right, apart from that, like, there is also words. And words have so much power, right? I think I was reading somewhere that, there's this community where the word feminism doesn't exist as a concept. So it's less likely that in the imagination it will percolate as an idea as well.
Sure.
And I think many times the language really influences why do we do what we do as well. And this conversation that we are having right now also inherently becomes a sort of a political act as well, right? So when we think about the language, the power it holds and everything that is there, how do you see or think that language shapes us, even with the lens of intersectional feminism that we have been talking about?
Right.
And I think one of the examples is just being like, folks sharing their pronouns, for example, right?
Yeah. I think language is so powerful. I think it can make somebody feel included and not included like this, right? I can go from I to us in a second, and the minute I go from we to I, it has such a big impact, right? Which is why you when whether you're reading or you're interacting with someone or listening to somebody, right? And words are really powerful, right? Words stay with you, right? Which is why I don't know who it was, but somebody who said that you'll forget what people did, you'll forget what people said, but you'll never forget how they made you feel. And sometimes people make you feel things by just their words, right? So who's allowed to sit with us and who's not allowed to sit with us, right? How I talk to people who do not come from the same structures that I come from. Like I said already, who I read, who I watch, who I listen to, who I'm around, who I'm not around, who my friends are, like how I just talk to people and how I talk about people, how I talk about some of these issues. It's all language, and language is so powerful. And I think very often people think, like I remember somebody was telling me that, oh my God, it's become such a fad for people to put their pronouns. And I was just telling them that how privileged you have to be to have a name like Mihir. Babe, nobody's asking you, like nobody's asking you, right? Like, and how privileged are you to not have to think about it, right? Like, that you don't have to. And it's assumptuous to think that like pronouns are just something that we like, do something, right? Do something, put your pronouns out there. What are you, like, if you don't care for it, then why not do it? Right? That's also my next question. If it doesn't bother you, then why don't you do it? Be a part of the movement. Do that. Yeah.
So Disha, like in contemporary India, right? How does the intersection of disability and gender kind of plays out, right? I think we have been talking a lot about different intersectionalities, but somehow, women living with disabilities or, other genders living with disabilities, beyond just the cishet men, is often not really talked about, right?
Right.
So even the act that we have, right, it talks about multiple experiences, and that is at the center of the act anyway.
Right.
But like the how the policies turn out to be, how the societal attitudes and expectations are, or how we just like build the world is like very, very different.
Right.
So how have you seen that playing out? And if you have any thoughts on how do we like really, really focus around that?
No, thanks for bringing it up. I think it's really important, like most of the other points that we've covered, and I'm sure very, very important ones that we missed out on because, you know, time is what we have. um, and I think with disability, primarily, like I would like to say, with just start with saying that, how mental health often gets negated whenever we talk about disability. And, we do have an imagination of most things that we talk about, right? We have an imagination of caste, we have an imagination of class, of gender, of everything. So I think very often, like the imagination of disability is absence of conversations around mental health and what does it really mean. And just like to bring in the focus there, I feel like is really important. I do think we live in a world where we talk about, when it comes to disability, and it's often negated, right? Accessibility, availability, affordability, attainability, a lot of these things, right? How many spaces, just talking about spaces, I'm not even going anywhere there, right, are disabled friendly? How much access does one have to washrooms that are disabled friendly? Just things that one takes for granted, right? Your public transport, accessing certain spaces, leisure, like who gets to access it, who gets to experience it, who doesn't get to, right? The inherent belief, right? So a lot of those things, how is it portrayed in the law and how is it portrayed in spaces? And I think spaces that in and of itself say a lot. And just going back to mental health, right? Like loneliness is a public health crisis, right? People die. People don't want to live. People kill themselves. It's called suicide. And that needs to be at the heart of the disability movement as well. Mental health in a lot of ways, is also about invisible disability sometimes, right? Like, so just the need to actually talk about it, right? To be open to have spaces where one can talk about it and not put the onus on the person, right? And of course, there's a lot that one can do and one can't do, but how some of these things are also structural. Whose suicides are we talking about and whose are we not? Which ones are institutional murders and which ones are not, right? What are you driving to make sure that that happens towards the end, right? How can we make an environment that is more friendly, full stop, right? That is inclusive, right? And it is absolutely very important to talk about disability when we talk about inclusion, because otherwise, what would inclusivity really mean? And again, same, like who are you hanging out with? Who are you not hanging out with? Who are you talking to? Whose books are you reading? Do you even understand what disability is, right? Are you talking about it from a perspective of being somebody who's never experienced any kind in your life? Or somebody who's experienced it without acknowledging it or understanding it? But yeah, what would it really mean to? And how can we bring more conversations around it, right? How can we be more compassionate, empathetic people? I feel like is something that we all need to answer for ourselves, right? And not coming from a place of privilege and not coming from a place of life having more, but how can you share what you have, right? What do you do with the power that you have? What do you do with the power that you're born with? How do you acknowledge it? How do you share it? How do you unlearn? How do you relearn, right? And how do you make every movement, every space more inclusive, right? And I think that is what is so important.
Yeah. And I think it also makes me think about men in general, right? Like in so many incidents, sexual harassment, the Atul Subhash case, and so many others, right? I think there are so many narratives that emerge, ranging from victim blaming to even things like hashtag not all men, and and in a lot of these times, essentially, right? I think. And I think even like on social media, there are like huge comments. Like sometimes I put something just like a post about feminism, and there have been comments over there. I'm sure like you would have received like a lot more crazy comments anyway. So just if you can take a stab at it, why, according to, why are men so defensive when, like, in situations like these?
You tell me. I don't know, right? Like every time there's a person saying men need to, but not all men. भाई किसने बोल दिया all men? एक तो पहली पोस्ट कह रहा है men, ठीक है? तो आपके अंदर जो कीड़ा है ना, क्योंकि कीड़ा है, जो आप defensive हो रहे हो, and then you must have had experiences of victim, of witnessing, being a victim or a perpetrator of violence. You must have had experiences in your life that are awful, and where you experienced loss and where you've had your own whatever, right? Like I'm not taking any of those away, and I'm sorry if it made you feel like that. I'm not to even apologize if it made you feel like that, right? Like, but what is it about me talking about men who have been oppressors makes you feel so inherently uncomfortable that you can't sit down and have a conversation with me without getting defensive? What is it? And it's probably the same thing that that we feel, right, as an upper caste, upper class English speaking woman, right? Who's named Disha, right? Who's named Disha, who doesn't have to think twice when I say that in today's incredible, overpowering, religious political party that we have, right? So what is it that makes them so inherently uncomfortable? Yeah, and that's something that I wonder, right? And is it just how the society has been structured in a way where you're not allowed to feel certain feelings? And I don't know what that would be like.
Yeah.
To express certain feelings, to share certain thoughts, right? And I'm sure that's tough, but like, what is it when I say men that your first response is not all men? I remember this is last year when I was here only for your birthday party. I was on my way back and we were talking to some of our friends, and I was just like, yeah, I think men are wait, what did I say? I don't remember. I think something around how men benefit from the system, because when you are benefiting, and the other person's response was just like shaking their heads furiously. No, but not everyone. A, I haven't said everyone. Right? B, I'm also saying, but when you are benefiting from a system, why would you challenge the system? And that's exactly when you need to challenge the system, right? Because you need to be the only way to grow is through discomfort. There is no other way where personally I've experienced anything in my own life where I have grown without discomfort and pain.
Right.
The only time I grow is through that. And these conversations are uncomfortable, which is why they need to be had. So yeah.
I think that makes sense. And I think that active introspection, like that discourse, putting yourself in places and situations where conversation is really uncomfortable, but you have that just because you want to grow, learn, and what you said, like learn, unlearn, relearn as well.
Absolutely.
And I think there was this meme, not a meme, but like rather an image that was making the rounds, which showed very, beautifully or poignantly, like, this image wherein like it put men across the spectrum, and on the extreme left are men like who were active perpetrators of violence, etc.
Correct.
And the on the extreme right are like idealistic men, which are few and far in between, unfortunately. But just on the right of that were men who are not perpetrating violence, who are not doing all of that, but by just being there, they're reaping the benefits.
Correct.
Every time they're not speaking up, every time they just, I think the solidarity is performative. I think it's still there.
Yeah.
And in popular imagination, those men can be feminists. In popular imagination, those men can be, just there, but they're not.
There.
Just there.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a question then. How can men truly be an effective allies?
I think you answered it, by being introspective. I think that's the first thing that you've got to do, is to really sit down and see answer that question for yourself. How can I be an ally? How can I be more inclusive? What can I do in my day to think, act, feel, right? And I feel like all of these things are equally important, right? I can think something and act another way, but really all in alignment for the betterment of a community that I have oppressed unknowingly, or my community has oppressed unknowingly, right? How can I actually do that? Introspect and act. And that's what you've got to do. And listen, for the love of God, on behalf of all women. Listen to the women in your lives. Just listen to what they have to say, right? Without negating it, without giving your opinion, without trying to save. Just listen, right? That's all. And that is the first thing to grow, is also to listen. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, how do you find spaces? We have been talking about love a lot, but how do we find spaces of love against this larger fight, or for this fight against larger systemic erasure? And belonging, like love and belonging both, having a space like that.
I think love and belonging is at the center of most movements. I think it is that separation and that isolation and that erasure that makes one long for belonging and love, and where it actually already exists. It really does. And I think sometimes these conversations become difficult because we forget what is at the heart of all of it, which is love, which is abundance, where there is joy, and and also what you said. I'm forgetting what you said. Belonging, yeah. And I think sometimes because the fight's not about who's right. Right? You'll find thousands and millions and a billion different opinions. You'll be right to some, you'll be wrong to some. You'll continue to find people who'll agree and people who'll disagree with you, and that will forever happen. That's gonna happen, right? You can stick to people who agree with you, and you can be happy about that, or you can actually sit with people who disagree with you and learn something from it, right? And I'm not trying to be right, because I will be wrong in someone's eye.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be wrong because I will be right in someone's eye. That's fine. I just have to be true to myself.
Yeah.
That's all that I have to be.
Yeah.
And for some communities, for generations and for years, right, that belonging has never come, right? Because the power at the center has consciously, consistently, continuously kept them at the margin. It takes a lot of hard work to continue to do that, right? To make sure that you're not one of us, right? Which is also why there is, when you see it out there, what is happening and everything, there is a lot of violence, there's a lot of hatred, there's a lot of exclusion, right? What would it be to actually sit down and, again, like, I feel like introspection, right? Really look at what can you do. To change the outside, I do have to make changes on the inside. That's just the truth of it.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of this quote by Sarah Ahmed, where she said, when we are not willing to participate in a sexist culture, we are willful.
Right.
When we are not willing to participate in a racist culture, we are willful. And perhaps it is that willfulness which turns rather that diagnosis into action, call an action against this unjust world, essentially overall as well.
Yeah.
And so therefore, when you look at this, right, how do you truly have feminism which is not performative, which is not just like tokenistic in nature, which is not woke fishing at times?
I think just to be true to yourself. I think that is the only way. Otherwise it can be all of these things. And sometimes even if you're being true to yourself, it can still be all of those things, but at least you know that you're being true to yourself. And I think that is the only way it will be, right? I'm not here to tell somebody that is not feminism. I'm here to only share what I think feminism is.
Yeah.
And to hear maybe what the other person is doing is it has a lot more impact. So just like I said, there is space for everybody in this movement.
Yeah.
It's an inclusive movement.
Yeah.
It talks about intersectionality at the heart of it.
Yeah.
If there is no intersectionality, there is no feminism.
Yeah.
And especially in a country like India, right? Like, I think it's really, really important because caste often gets left out in conversations like this. Like, it is so important to talk about intersectionality, and if there is no intersectionality, there is no feminism. So how do you embody that intersectionality? Like I said, right? Who do you read? Who do you hang out to? Where are you working? How much money are you making? Which language do you speak in? You know, who are you sleeping with? Who are you dating? What are the kind of fantasies that you have? Like, how do you spend your time? Which spaces are you in? Which spaces are you occupying? How many of those are you taking away from people, right? Without even realizing it. And when you realize it, what do you do with that realization? And I think that is where true feminism really lies, right? To be more cognizant, to be more conscious, to accept, adapt, learn, unlearn, relearn, and apply. Really apply, right? Yeah.
No, of course. And I think I've always had this one question, right? And I would love to hear from your experience. So, as a feminist, participating in these larger movements and everything, what has really kept you going? Because I'm sure it has been difficult.
Right.
There are days when, when the sheer task or something that you heard or something that you've seen has bogged you down, right? It's very emotional in nature as well. And it's not easy to just rise up every day. So what has kept you going? Of course, one is just the sheer necessity of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But beyond that, if anything comes to mind, I know, like, on the other aspect of it is like you try to center yourself through meditation and all.
Correct.
But like there are so many other things you might be doing or feeling or believing, I guess.
I think one, like I said, I think at the center of it is love. At the center of it is just pure joy. And if it's not equality, if it's not equity for everyone, it's not for me. It's either everyone on the table or none of us. I'm one person in a room. I'm not the most important person in that room. And like the sheer, unshakable belief and faith and trust that it's going to take as long as it's going to take, but it will happen. So that's something that I absolutely believe in. And when you hear about what's happening around you, and now since we do also have more access and easy access, right? मतलब तब भी आप पेपर में पढ़ते थे तो क्या पेपर में छप रहा है, क्या पेपर में नहीं छप रहा, कौन सा न्यूज़ आप टीवी पे देख रहे हो. अब आपके पास आपके बगल में अपना फ़ोन है, उसमें भी क्या आ रहा है क्या नहीं आ रहा, पर आपके पास एक्सेस तो ज़्यादा, वो डिस्टेंस कम हो गया उस एक्सेस का. तो जो आसपास हो रहा है उससे it's human to be affected, right? It's human to get affected. And I'm a very emotional and a very sensitive person, but I'm also very determined, right? I know what I need to do for myself and for others, and what is the change that I want to see in the world, and just wake up and decide that I'm going to do that every day. So I think it's a deliberate, conscious effort that you take every day. And it is how I feel like it's an feminism, like love is an action word. So you feel it and you do it, you work around it, and that's at the heart of it all, right? Like for me, that is what it is, that like, come what may, I'm not gonna give up on this. It's going to continue to affect people, and it's going to continue to affect me, but my faith that it's going to change and things are changing is unshakable. It's unshakable. It's very strong. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And being vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah.
As we kind of come to the close of the conversation, I guess I have the last couple of questions for you. And these are the kind of questions we ask everyone who's coming on, coming on the episodes or the podcast. I mean, one is just that if you're elected as an MP tomorrow, what kind of bill would you introduce in the parliament and why?
I don't know.
Okay. It's okay to say I don't know.
I have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other question, or do you have any thoughts on like maybe this is something that you feel very passionate about? So maybe you don't know the bill, but this is a cause.
All of them that I spoke about, like I would just, there's so many. I don't know if there could be one.
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest. Yeah, it's the problem of many.
Yeah.
Problem of many. Yeah.
Which is the challenge at times as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that as well. And as our conversation is closing, I would love to know from you any 3 things to read, 2 things to watch, or just listen. And 1 person to follow. And you don't have to stick to these numbers per se, but whatever comes to your mind for all our listeners.
So I do think that one should definitely read, like if you're from this country, definitely look at works of Baba Saheb, including some of the papers that he had published, Urmila Pawar, B.B. Kamble. There is a lot that is out there that will help you understand some of these things better. And there has been enough work done by, feminists even now, and now with social media and everything, it's out there, and it's good to challenge your understanding of feminism by looking at some of the work that you wouldn't usually look at. I'm not much of a watcher, so I wouldn't know much there. Apart from Bollywood films, which I wouldn't suggest. But I do think to listen to, there have been lots of interviews and videos and podcasts done by some amazing people who are doing some great work. I mentioned Unsound Project. I mentioned the Queer Muslim Project. Also, Riya Singh has done some podcasts around caste, and I think they're absolutely brilliant. I do know a lot of people have done podcasts on transness and really bringing that into light. And I would suggest that people actually go and hear them out, pick up a book, read, interact, bring these into your conversation. So and I'll definitely comment more. On my list.
Yes, then we can reshare it with everyone afterwards.
Absolutely. And I do think some people, like for example, somebody like Butler, whose work is so much around the social contract, has written a beautiful paper called I don't remember the name, but it's around violence and mourning, right? And it talks about loss, and it's written really well, and it's very unlike Butler. And again, not advocating for her work here at all, but I'm just saying that people write, and there are only 5 things that we know that they've written, where there could be, of course, many more. And I think it's the other things that we need to pick up. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds brilliant. I think a lot to add to my own reading list as well.
And bell hooks, Maya Angelou, the list doesn't end.
Yeah, 100%.
So John Truth, there is so much to, because I think what is important is to look at perspectives that are separate from ours, and that is the key.
And that really challenge you, which you want to.
Absolutely,
I think that makes a lot of sense. And you also wrote a postcard to your future self. Do you mind just reading it? And I'm very, very curious. What did you write?
Oh, it's quite simple, but I will read it. Dear Disha, I love you. I've always loved you, and I will continue to love you forever. I got you, babe. Please keep sharing, keep learning, unlearning, relearning, applying that knowledge to yourself and other people around you. You're important. You're just not the most important person in the room. Respect, appreciate, acknowledge, and grow, and help others grow. Accept, appreciate, and love. Love you more than you know, Disha.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's brilliant. I think it has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm so grateful to have you as a friend. Over these years, there's just so much that I've not just learned from you, but also really cherished. Our friendship, our bond, and mean a lot.
No,
to me in so many ways.
Yeah, that is so kind. Thank you for saying that, and it really, really You can also cut this part of this not relevant, but really, like, I remember the conversations outside Barakhamba. Barakhamba is beautiful, right? There's amaltas and there's pila flowers all over, and we're having chai. And I think this is in the afternoon, just talking about like where we were at, and you were, mentioning something about what you want to do, and pretty much 2 years from then,
Mhm.
2 years from then, you're doing that. My heart is full. I am so
Oh,
glad. I am genuinely in awe of you putting this together. I am really, really grateful to have you in my life.
mm.
And I am so, so, so happy to see how Postcards is turning out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you are a big part of it as our mentor.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's made of some beautiful people who I'll
Yeah.
give a who will be in the shout out at the end of the episode. But like they are the ones whose belief, whose work literally makes it what it is. And no, we don't need to cut it. I think it should be part of it. It's like the experience. But thank you so much for being part of the
Thank
episode
you.
and for this beautiful conversation. I think I'll kind of end by, and I'll have to read it because I don't remember all the words, but I'll kind of end by reading the Maya Angelou's words, which she wrote in Still I Rise, which kind of champions womanhood, sexuality, rising above oppression, and things like that. And there's an excerpt to it which says, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why you beset with gloom? Because I will walk like I have got oil wells pumping in my living room." So thank you again. My heart is also full. And please, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this episode. If you're listening to it on any of your platform, please do drop us a comment. There's also a Notion link in the episode where you can read and learn more about the research. You will find more suggestions there across a variety of things. If you want to delve into this topic more, do check out Disha's socials and follow her incredible work online. We'll drop that again over there. And yeah, just share comments. Very shortly, we're also releasing WhatsApp groups where you can be part of our communities through both the city spaces as well as thematic groups. Like if you're interested in gender, we are hosting meetups around that, and you can join that. So a lot is upcoming, and we're really really excited to share this space, including our newsletter, which drops shortly as well. So thanks again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being so kind and giving us this space and opportunity and lending your ear and time. And until next time, see you.
See you. Thank you.